with, and let's start with the Anish game, because again, I actually have not looked at any of the games. Okay, so this game between Anish Giri and Wang Hao starts with pawn to d4 on move 1. All right, so d4, Wang Hao plays knight f6, Anish plays c4, Wang Hao plays e6. Again, there are a couple different setups you can play. Usually at the beginning of the game, you can play with d5 e6, which is queen's gambit declined. You can also play d5 c6, which is a Slav, for example, d4 d5 c4 c6, or d4 d5 c4 e6. So Wang Hao plays knight f6 c4, and now really the two choices here are either you play pawn to e6 and develop the bishop on this diagonal, or you play pawn to g6 and fianchetto your bishop and play the King's Indian / Grunfeld defenses. All right, so in this game, Wang Hao plays e6. Knight f3 played by Anish Giri. This turns into this can turn to many things. First of all, there's knight c3 here for white, after which black can play bishop b4. This is the Rogozin. Black can also play bishop e7, which is the queen's gambit declined, and there are also other lines like d takes c4. So here Anish plays g3, playing the Catalan defense as white. Basically, the point of the Catalan is white fianchettos the bishop on g2 here, puts it on the long diagonal, and long term tries to move the knight out of the way and attack. So Wang Hao goes bishop e7. Anish plays bishop to g2. Castles, both sides castle. This is all pretty standard theory so far. Pawn takes c4. Queen to c2 played by Anish here. Nothing too crazy. This is all pretty standard. a6 a4. One of the first big branches here is white can play pawn to a4 or queen takes c4. Now, as most people remember, when Garry Kasparov was very young, he was playing against Anatoly Karpov, and then also in his last world championship match against Vladimir Kramnik, Gary really did like this Catalan variation with bishop d2 here. Bishop g5 is also a line as well, so it's something that Gary really liked. It's something that's been prominent for many years. It has withstood the test of time. All right, so a4 is played here by Anish, also a standard move. Again, the idea being if you take right away after b5 queen c2 bishop b7, black gets the bishop developed immediately, and he can play for knight bd7 and c5. And so the idea after a4 is that black cannot protect this pawn again on c4 with b5, because now you take the pawn. Black is unable to take and keep the pawn chain alive, because then you would lose the rook on a8 here. So b5 is not a move, and basically the idea is that now if black doesn't get b5, where is this bishop going? For example, let me just make a random move as an illustration. After rook e8, queen takes c4, without b5 you can't really fianchetto your bishop on the same diagonal as the white bishop here. If you play something like b6, white can even go knight e5 and fossilize your rook on a8 here. So that's the main reason behind a4. So basically you prevent black from gaining space with b5 and fianchettoing the bishop to b7, and additionally you're just going to capture the pawn later. So bishop d7 is played here by Wang Hao. Anish plays queen takes c4. Wang Hao plays bishop to c6. Anish goes bishop f4. Again, all pretty standard, all well-known theory. Bishop to d6, and now here Anish plays knight c3. Again, this is a system that has been played many times. I'm kind of curious to see what the improvement was. My most recent adventure with this as black was in the Sinkfield Rapid event that was held online last September, I believe, where I had this against Levon Aroni with the black pieces. So a5 e3 is played here. Again, the point being that in this position, white has double pawns on f2 and f4. White can also play e3 to consolidate it. Additionally, long term, white can try to go king h1, rook g1, and use the rook on the g file as well. So there are many different ways of playing this for white, and that's why the double pawns are not actually so bad in this situation. Secondarily, black kind of is struggling with development of the queenside pieces, and so a5 is a logical move. First of all, because what a5 does is that it stops white from taking more space. White might want to go b4 and b5, and then additionally you can put the knight on b4 where it's outposted by the pawn on a5, and then maybe reroute it to the center of the board. So e3 played here. Knight a6 by Wang Hao. Anish plays knight to e5. Black trades, white trades, c6. Again, all of this seems pretty normal. The thing is, white even though it looks like white's king is a little bit vulnerable, white's idea is to go king h1, rook g1, and try to play on the g file. When you combine that with a very solid pawn formation here, and then the knight diamond, I guess, in the center with the knight on e5, it's not as scary for white as it looks like it could be. All right, so h3 played here by Anish. Queen to b6, hitting the pawn on b2. And now queen e2 is played here by Anish. c5 by Wang Hao. Again, black's problem here is that, as I said before, white really would just like to move the king, probably double stack and attack. So for example, say you go knight b4, logical move, I go king h2, rook a d8, and now if I can get like rook g1 and rook g2, and I'm just gonna make a random move like rook g2 here, it gets very, very scary, because even though they're double pawns, as you can tell, this is a very, very nice center part of the board. And once you double stack, black's king is under huge pressure here because of this this open g file, which occurred because white took with the g pawn towards the center and opened up this line. All right, so let's go back. Okay, so here after queen e2, c5 is played by Wang Hao, trying basically to open up the c and the d files, get his rooks in the game as fast as possible.
RP just subscribed.
So here rook f d1 is played. Let me leave this back on for you guys. Sorry, I realized I had this off. Actually, let me adjust it. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Adjust it. Just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, so here c5 is played by Wang Hao, rook f d1 played by Anish. Again, as you see, I've had the bar off, but you'll see the computer already, it really likes white quite a bit. So therefore it begs the question, did Wang Hao already do something wrong here, or is this or is this just Anish just came with a new idea? Now my personal take is that probably it's a little bit it's probably just a little bit unhappy for black here, but I think c5 might be a critical mistake. And in fact, as we look at the computer says c5 is a big mistake, and that black should have played
just subscribed.
something like g6 or rook a d8 is what it appears, and avoid opening it up, because the problem is, in fact, you think that when you open up the center it's really good for black, but the problem is that with this jumbo horse on e5, which can't really be removed since the knight's in the way of the pawn, white can actually fight for the file. And secondarily, if we look at this conceptually, just go back one move, you'll notice that in this position that black has an outpost on b4, so black can put a knight on b4 because the pawn at a5 and the pawn at a5 supports it. So if you look at this knight, it can't be removed. The pawn's been pushed, there's no pawn here, so there's no pawn that you can push to remove the knight. So it's a very nice outpost. But when you go here, you'll notice that what black has done by pushing is now white has the same setup where white can also get an outpost on this square because your pawn is no longer on c6. So c5 might be a mistake here. I'm not sure how big a mistake it is, but it does give white an outpost as well. So now you have this outpost for your black knight, but white gets their own outpost on this b5 square as well when you push. So rook fd1, pawn takes, rook a d8 played here by Wang Hao, rook takes by Anish. They trade rook d1, queen a8. Again, already it's starting to look very sketchy. After rook takes d8, I'm really perplexed as to why Wang Hao didn't take with the rook, but maybe there's tricks with, like, I don't know, queen b5, and if you trade queens, now I can actually take the double pawns because I attack the knight, and then once you move your knight, I just win the pawn a5, and this should be much better, if not outright winning for white. So that's probably why Wang Hao takes with the queen, to avoid this nastiness with queen b5. Rook d1 is played, queen to a8 played here by Wang Hao. King g1 played by Anish. Very nice pragmatic move, steps out of the fossil with b5 here. Now you really would like to keep pushing on your position and do something different, but the problem is, you know, again, if you play something like queen b5, knight c7, black is holding both pawns. If you go queen b3, now I go b5 with the fossil, and if you go like queen b6, I get my knight to the center of the board. So so basically Anish plays king g1, very prophylactic, very calm move. King g3 is a computer move. Is king g3 really the computer move? It's not. Yeah, king g3 is showing up now on mine as, yeah, king g3. I mean, okay, a computer can say king g3. I mean, whatever. We're humans. We don't play stupid. We don't play stuff like that. That's just ridiculous. Okay, so king g1 played by Anish like a proper human. Knight to b4 played by Wang Hao. Queen b5 played by Anish. Again, he gets the queen where he wants it, and this is why c5 actually is a slight mistake, because as you'll see, this, even if it's not the knight, it's a queen here that's outposted, and it's really targeting both these pawns. And black has a very weak queen here on a8 in this position, so white is doing very well here. So knight d5, they trade. Anish goes rook c1. Again, another nice move. That being said, it feels like it's a little bit, the advantage has gone away a little bit. I don't know if queen b5 wasn't right, or maybe it feels like somehow with less pieces on the board, Wang Hao should be able to draw this game. So I'm kind of surprised. Kind of surprised that Anish won from this position. So rook c1's played here. h6. Now h6 looks like a bad move to me optically. I don't know, but I would assume you want to go g6 in the structure, although maybe if you go g6 there's queen d7 and this is very weak. But it feels like when you go h6 there are always going to be problems now with your pawns, because if you ever push this one, like I'll just make a random example, something like this, white can get an outpost here on g6 for the knight, and so you can never really push this pawn. So I don't know about h6. I mean, maybe it's, I don't know, it feels a little bit off to me. Oh, Wang Hao, oh, he had no time. Okay, so h6, queen d7, knight f6 is played, queen d6. Now he goes g6, which I actually like. I was gonna say that it felt, that's why I felt like h6 might be a little bit dubious, like you don't necessarily need this move played. But anyway, b3 played here by Anish. h5 played, king h2, king g7, queen d4 played by Anish. Now again, this is kind of the point. You know what's amazing when you look at this position is that ironically all the troubles occur for black because this h pawn is pushed. I think like if we go back here, if you could get this position with like rook c1 g6 for example, and you get this position, it's still probably bad. I'm trying to see what happened in the game. Something like this, king g7, queen d4. After something like rook d8, it's still probably probably bad for black, but it's not as bad as if this pawn is on h5 here. So again, I think my intuition here is correct, even having not looked at this deeply, that this h6 move kind of leads to a lot of the problems. Even if a computer still would laugh at all of us and draw the position, it feels a touch loose. It just feels a touch loose. Okay, so b3, h5, king g7, queen d4, rook d8, queen b2, and yeah, this is the problem. Basically this knight can never move. If you move the knight, you get fossilized, for example, where you lose your rook on d8. If you ever move your king, white can also take the pawn, and now you get your knight gets fossilized. So when you take the knight, you lose your knight, which basically means that you're kind of stuck. This king and this knight are just stuck here, which also means this knight on e5 is amazing because it just sits here and waits to go here, maybe sacrifice, maybe back. And white additionally has rook c7 to put pressure on the 7th ring. So at this point already, I think it's extremely unpleasant and very, very hard to play, even if you have time on the clock here. So queen b8 played by Wang Hao. Important move, tries to get the queen to the center of the board. Really, you need to do something about this diagonal, especially with the queen and the knight targeting the blocking of the knight on g7 and f6 here. So b4 played by Anish. Wang Hao takes, Anish goes rook c4, and now actually the computer kind of, the bar starts to jump. Actually, in fact, b4 is a very nice move. So what you want to think about in this position is, how does white proceed? Your knight is perfectly placed, your queen is perfectly placed, like black is stuck, the king and the knight are stuck. So somehow you want to activate this rook, and now you don't really have activations. Like rook c7 looks like a very logical move, but the queen covers the square, so you can't bring the rook in right away. You also can't contest the d file. So b4 is a very nice move by Anish. Pawn takes, now rook c4. Brilliant move, brilliant idea. The idea is that you want to put the rook on b4 and you want to put maximum pressure. Again, the classic right triangle here, with rook c4 takes b4, and you put pressure on the pawn on b7, and then black's king and knight and the pawn on f7 are all extremely weak here. So very nice idea. Now b3 played here. Now apparently the computer says rook d1 is a move, and or at least temporarily it said rook b1 was a move, and somehow this is okay for black. Maybe the computer gives something very weird like queen b4, queen d8. Oh, and if queen b7, you have the very naughty knight to g4 check. And again, you guys, now we're gonna go back, and you have knight g4 because if pawn takes, you have queen h4 check, king g2, queen h1, king g3, rook g1. King is stuck here, you have to block, and then it's just check, and then you're just getting checkmated, or you're gonna lose all your material basically in this position. So now let's go back, you guys. So now let's think for a second. So this, you guys, I hate to say it, is probably why, if we go back to move number 22 in this position, white was supposed to go king g3, because none of these ideas with any of these funky knight g4 checks ever exist as the king is on g3. So this again is why computers start to make us they make us double clutch and start to wonder exactly what game we're playing. So let's go back. Okay, so anyway, Wang Hao had no time, but apparently like I said, king g3. Yeah, so apparently this rook d1 move, rook b4, it's probably the same trick, right? You've got this queen d8 trick, and in this case of rook b4 versus queen b4, if white takes, it's not knight g4 check here, because white can take with the knight, and it's a fossil check on g7. And then if black can go king e5 here, however,
choose your fate,
and
watch the show or watch the
and
show.
after rook takes f7, you go king h6. And again, because the king is kind of a little bit iffy here on h2, this apparently is a draw somehow. So this would have made a lot of sense, but very, very hard to find with no time on the clock. So I mean, it's hard to critique Wang Hao for not finding rook d1. Now if Wang Hao has like probably 20 minutes here, I wouldn't be shocked if he finds this rook d1 queen d8 idea. But he plays b3 here, so rook to b4 played by Anish, queen to a7 by Wang Hao, and now Anish plays rook takes b3, queen takes a4, and now rook takes b7, and now the position just completely collapses here. White has everything perfectly placed. The rook is perfect on b7, it targets f7, and the king on g7. Knight targets f7, queen targets on the diagonal, and it's just basically GG. So I think at this point there's really only, this is the last moment where there's this one little trick with rook d1, which if Wang Hao had found it, he would have been able to save the game. Very, very hard, very, very hard to find, especially with no time on the clock. It's just a tough situation. So he goes here, rook takes b3, takes rook b7, and now it's pretty much lost. So Wang Hao cannot play rook f8 here, because now white can go knight to d7. Rook protects the knight, so everything collapses here for black. Your rook is under attack, your knight is under attack, and it's just GG's. So Wang Hao goes queen e8, Anish plays rook a7. I mean, you can probably even take on f7, but you see, the one thing is, if you take on f7 and you get to this end game, there is some potential of fortress. I think this probably is just winning for white, but there is a possible fortress with the rook and the knight versus the queen. So instead he goes rook a7, rook d5, queen to b7. Perfect technique by Anish. Hits the pawn at f7 again. Now rook a8 is also a threat, and it's just over. So Wang Hao goes knight e4, and Anish just plays knight takes f7. And now the difference here is that in this position, let's just say black goes queen f8, you could not take with a knight because black has rook d7 in between, with the knight and the rook protecting each other. But after knight e4, knight f7, there's no rook d7, because now you move the knight off the square. The knight's here versus here, so if you go rook d7, I just take, and your knight's not protecting. So after knight takes f7, Wang Hao resigns, and Anish wins the game. And barring any huge results of the top half of the table, he is going to be half a point out of first place with 5 rounds to go. So very, very nice, very nice game by Anish, and a lot of credit. Very, very smooth, especially like a very smooth game overall, and it's going to be exciting. Very important win for him. I think, again, you have limited games with the white pieces, so you want to make the most of them, and